Welcome to the Mischief Maker broadcast, where chaos, creativity, and common sense collide. Your host, Joel Freeman, was kicked out of high school in Alberta, Canada. He left home at 17 and hitchhiked around North America as a long-haired hippie and dope-smoking fool. He made a 180-degree change, becoming one of the first chaplains in the history of the NBA. As a professional speaker, Joel has traveled to well over 55 countries. His many books have been published in 28 foreign translations. Pieces from his Black History collection have been seen by millions at the United Nations and many other venues. And now, the Chief Mischief Maker himself, Dr. Joel A. Freeman.
Hey guys, Baby Joel here. The older version of me says that it's probably his age that tricks people into thinking that he's an adult.
There you have it. Some wisdom from Baby Joel. Well, we have a very interesting show tonight, and I do hope that we have a lot of people asking questions. And please, when you do, wherever you're viewing this from, live, Japan, Australia, India, Canada, United Kingdom, United States, wherever you're viewing this, please indicate where you're writing from, where you live, and so that we can just kind of get a flavor of all the folks that are here. We're going to talk tonight about the Shroud of Turin. Now, this is a fascinating topic, and I think it's something that is going to be very intriguing because this is something that has captured the imagination of people for centuries, both religious and irreligious people. And so please feel free to ask any questions. We have a gentleman by the name of Stephen, and his last name is Kinstler, Stephen Kinstler. He has been educated in a postgraduate course out of a school in Rome that is specifically dedicated to understanding the pros and cons, ups and downs, and all arounds, the archaeology, all the things related to the study of the Shroud of Turin. And so, and I personally, I know when they had an exhibit down at in Atlanta, Georgia, the Omni Center, I believe it was, I knew some people that were part of that exhibit. And then one time when I was traveling through Italy, I arrived in Turin just at the off chance of seeing the Shroud of Turin. So, and I've read quite extensively, but I'm going to approach this as if I know nothing about it. And we're going to be tutored and instructed, and a lot of interesting insights, I think, from Stephen Kinstler. So we have a song right now that I wrote, and Mel, let's hit the song.
I'm history and I'm sick and tired of repeating myself. Been watching for centuries, seen it all unfold. Humans are humans, all from the same mold. I was there when Satan swelled with pride. I was also there when Jesus died. Been watching Africa, Israel, and Algeria, Russia, China, Persia, and Syria, England, Rome, the Huns and Bombay, Turkey, Greece, France, and the USA. From slavery's dark days to civil rights fought, Black history's chapters, battles hard fought, segregation, discrimination we must remember. But it's time to unite and make amends together. One thing I've seen since I was just a teen, a lot of good people outweigh the few evil. Break the chains, break the cycle, let's move forward, let love be our revival. No more repeating the mistakes of the past. It's time for change, let's make it last. I'm sick and tired, let's break free and embrace uncomfortability. No more ignoring, let's heal the divide. Learn from our past, let love be our guide. In America's story, chapters filled with pride, but also deliberate acts of shame we won't hide. Native land stolen, oppression and pain. It's time to acknowledge, it's time to reclaim. From the Civil War to battles for justice and peace, the fight for equality will never cease. We can't erase the past, but we can grow. Let's build a future where the truth will glow. I'm sick and tired of repeating myself, but hope lingers on. It's time to delve into a world where history's lessons we've learned. Let's rewrite the future, let humanity be burned. Break the change, break the cycle, let's move forward. Let God bring revival. No more repeating the mistakes of the past. It's time for change, let's make it last. Break the chains, break the cycle, let's move forward. Let God bring revival. No more repeating the mistakes of the past. It's time for change, let's make it last.
Well, that song originally was a spoken word piece. And the more I played around with it, the more I decided, let's produce this as a song. I'm kind of partial to the blues. I'm one of those kind of guys that, if I'm in Florence, Italy, or wherever I am, and there's someone playing music, I'm a sucker for live music. And I hope you enjoyed that song. Tonight, if you're watching this live, for those who aren't, you aren't, but those who are, there's a QR code above. And if you wanted to go to that, it's a website called chiefmischiefmaker.com. That's 3 words, chiefmischiefmaker.com. And one of the first things you're going to see is my definition of what it means to be a mischief maker. And the whole purpose of the show is to help to grow up a whole group of people, take people from A to A plus and becoming a mischief maker in your respective communities. And that means looking through a different lens and looking at it from a different angle. And so tonight we're going to be talking about the Rosetta Stone. I almost said that. We're going to talk about the Shroud of Turin. And I love talking about these types of artifacts. And Stephen, come on in and let's discuss this. Stephen Kinstler, and it's a joy to have you on. And thank you so much for all the study that you've done on this particular topic. I might play the devil's advocate at different times. And like I said earlier, I'm going to approach this as if I've never heard about this before in some levels. But if you could kind of give us a sense of what is the Shroud of Turin? And as I mentioned earlier, why has this, a two-part, why has this captured the imagination of people and I guess stirred up controversy for so many centuries?
Right. So thanks for having me on your show. Again, my name is Stephen Kinstler, and I've been studying the Shroud intensely since 2021. And like you said, I studied online at a school in Rome, the Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum. It's an online course. I have a postgraduate certificate, if you will, in Shroud Studies. And so, and the Shroud, if you're not familiar with it, it's a burial sheet. That's why it's called a shroud. It's actually the most studied artifact in the world, believe it or not, more than the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Rosetta Stone. It is the most studied artifact. It's a 14-foot, 3-inch long by 3 feet, 7-inch wide cloth. And it bears the faint image of the front and back side of a naked, crucified man in a burial pose. And I think I sent you an image. If you can pull up image number 3, do you see that on the screen?
Just keep talking. It'll be there.
There you go. So what you see here, it's actually just 2 different versions of it. The top version is a very is what you would see basically when you go see it. You can barely see the image of the man. You see some burn marks. It's a really long sheet. It's linen cloth. The bottom is a different version that shows the enhanced contrast. And so as you can kind of see there, on the left side is the front side of the man. On the right side is the back side, and it folded, wrapped him sort of like this, right? If he's in the middle, it's wrapped like this, where his head is in the middle of the sheet there. So there's a faint image of a man there, and there's wounds and blood stains on the body that are consistent with a Roman scourging where the person was whipped. And also wounds and blood stains from a crucifixion. There's nail wounds in the wrist. There's a side wound where the man of the shroud was pierced in the side. There's blood stains in the hair and in the scalp. So it's very consistent with what we know of Jesus's crucifixion. But the interesting thing is, if you go to slide number 1, you can kind of see how we might divide this up and see. We get a close-up of the face here. And again, this is the enhanced contrast version of it. And on each side of this face, you see the front side and the back side. But what's interesting about the shroud and what it's known for is that when you take a photograph of this and you look at the negative becomes the positive image. So looking at this, it's kind of abstract. You don't really, if you're in the Middle Ages and didn't know, you saw this image, you might not know what to make of it. But, fast forward to the 19th century, and the negative looks like this in slide number 2. All right, we get a detailed image and a face of a figure that we all might recognize as Jesus because of the icons we've seen over the years. And there's art history that studies, the different points of congruence that agree with this face on the shroud. But again, we see a negative, and in the negative, we see the positive image of this man of the shroud. And so the shroud behaves like a photographic negative. This was first discovered by an Italian amateur photographer. His name was Secondo Pia. That was on May 28, 1898. So it wasn't until 1898 when the first photograph was taken. But a lot of the controversy and the questions around the shroud is based on, okay, there's not much of a historical record before the 1350s, before the 14th century. The first actual historical record of what we know as the shroud today is around 1356. And of course, many of you may know that in 1988, it was radiocarbon dated to the years 1260 to 1390, which just cast a lot of doubt on the authenticity of the shroud. And of course, the implication here is, the debate is usually around whether or not God is authentic, right? Is it truly the burial cloth of Jesus, or is it just a fake? And that's the debate. And why does that matter? Because, if it's fake, then it's just another picture of Jesus. That's all you got. You proved it's just another picture of Jesus. But if it's real, then it's in my opinion, the single most important artifact in history, because we now have solid evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And for those who deny the resurrection or don't believe in it, the question that surrounds this debate is, how was that image formed, right? There's lots of different hypotheses. I don't know if we're going to get into those tonight because that's a really deep part of the science. But yeah, how was it formed? And we don't know to this. The short answer is we don't know how that image was formed today. With our modern technology, we still can't replicate it. So that's the intro to the shroud.
So in the mid 14th century, that's when it was found or uncovered, or whatever word one wants to use. And when it comes to police work and things like that, they call it a chain of custody. Mm-hmm. And they want to know who had it, when, and did they handle this evidence properly. What is the chain of custody, if you will,
Sure.
Prior to? Is there any evidence prior to the mid 14th century, and then thereafter, and how it made its way to Turin?
Right. So we refer to it as the Shroud of Turin because it's a burial shroud located in Turin, Italy. So when we hear about it, it's not just something that was manufactured in Turin or something like that. It's just this is where the shroud lies today. But since the record begins in the 1350s, we do have a trail from the 1350s to present for what we know as the shroud today. But what did they call it? It was found, or not found, but it appeared on the historical record in Lire, France. So what did they call the shroud then? Was it the Shroud of Lire? Before that it was in Chambéry, France, or after that, sorry, it went to Chambéry, France, rather. Was it called the Shroud of Chambéry, right? And then it moved to Turin, where we know it as the Shroud of Turin. So my point is, we have this label of the Shroud of Turin, but if we look at the historical record prior to that, what if it had another name, right? What if it was known by something else? So while it's true that it begins in the 1350s, the mid 14th century, there are references to a burial cloth or linen that bears an image of Jesus. There's legends of, not legends, but there's history of a burial cloth of Jesus, some of which have details that talk about an image on that linen. And the most famous one, again, not known as the Shroud of Turin or the Shroud, but it's in antiquity, it's known as the tradition of the image of Edessa, sometimes referred to as the Mendelian. And the image of Edessa goes way back to like the 6th century, as far as like the details that we know about this particular image. And it's the legend, or the tale rather, the story goes that there's an image. It's called the image of Edessa, and it refers to the face of Jesus on a cloth. And a lot of people say, well, that's not the same thing because it's just referring to the face. Well, when you look at the descriptions of the image of Edessa throughout history, you find out that it's a tetradiplone, I think is how you say it. Meaning it's a cloth that was folded or doubled in fours. And when you fold the shroud up a certain way, research has shown you can fold it in such a way that it's doubled in four, meaning tetradiplone, and doubled in four so that only the face shows. And so if that's how this image of Edessa at one point was referred to, it's quite possible that it was a full-length sheet that had the entire image on it, but just only the face was shown. So my point is there is other references to a burial sheet bearing an image known as the image of Edessa.
And we have some very smart listeners and viewers, and in fact, I want to encourage anyone to respond, ask any questions that are on your mind, any comments that you may have, and if it's germane to our topic this evening, we'll discuss it. How do we know that this is not something that was forged? Is it possible that something like this could be forged?
I mean, anything's possible. But something like this, no. As I said in my opening, we don't have the technology today to reproduce all the image characteristics of the shroud using today's technology. And I'll get into that in a minute. But it's funny because when I first started studying the shroud, I was like, this has to be some kind of forgery. This has to be man-made. It's too perfect to match the account of the Gospels. It's just somebody got the idea. They know what happened to Jesus, and they just drew on a sheet, and that's what it is. Well, again, remember, it's a negative. So that's a really important thing to remember. But let me take a step back. The reason we know all that we know about the shroud as far as the science and stuff comes from a team known as the Shroud of Turin Research Project that visited Turin, Italy in 1978. They're invited by the King of Italy, King Umberto II, to come and do a 5-day study. And they took photographs of the shroud, all non-destructive tests, and spent about 3 years analyzing their data. And the whole reason they went to Turin was to answer the question, how was the image formed? How was it made? And there were some scientists that were joking. They're like, this is a free trip to Italy. We're going to get there. We'll pull out our microscopes. And in 45 minutes, we'll see the brush strokes. We'll see the painting, and we'll be done with this, and we'll have a free trip to Italy.
We'll go to the Leaning Tower of Pisa or Florence, right, or something like that. Yeah.
Right. It's like they expected they would just go to Italy. They'd see the brush strokes. It's a painting. Because at that point, they hadn't really looked at it under the microscope. They just had photographs that were done by Giuseppe Henri in 1931, of course, Secondo Pio's in 1898, but they hadn't actually had a chance to study it under the microscope. And after 5 days of review, 3 years of analysis, and even to present day, we don't know how the image was formed. They found out, though, what it's not. There's no paints, dyes, pigments, oils, powders, paint binders. There's no brush strokes or any other sorts of artistic renderings at the microscopic level, let alone anything visible to the naked eye. So when you look at it, you go, that looks too perfect to be a painting, or to be a, something supernatural or whatever. It's got to be a painting. Well, again, under the microscope, none of that shows up. In fact, the areas which make up the image are just discolored fibers, probably due to like a chemical change in the cellulose of the linen from dehydration or oxidization. Something caused the linen fibers to change color. And so under the microscope, they don't see like paint between the threads because there's no paint there. It's just they look at it and they go, oh, that fiber is discolored. But I want to pause there and sort of, if this was a painting, right? It's a negative. Remember that's important.
Mm-hmm.
You have to ask yourself, why would someone create an artwork with the means, without the means rather, to showcase its unique quality, the quality of being a lifelike image when the lights and darks are reversed, right? Why create that without the means to showcase that quality? In other words, there's no photography, there's no darkroom, there's no way to develop the shroud. It's just a negative image. We understand this as photography, of course, but those means to develop that negative wasn't invented until about 500 years later when it appeared on the historical record. I'm sorry, when the first photograph was taken. So from 1350s to the end of the 19th century, about 500 years, and there was no concept of photography or negatives or anything like that. It's like someone creating a circuit board in the 1350s without electricity. You just, the tools are there, right? To do it. It's not about lacking the tools. It's about lacking the very idea of what the final product is. And so the real question isn't, could they have made this kind of image? The question really is, did they have any reason, context, or ability to even conceptualize it in their time?
Gotcha. Now, you have 3D imaging and spectral analysis. What has that kind of technology done in terms of either supporting or debunking the elements of the Shroud of Turin?
Right. So I didn't get into that, but the Shroud itself, which is very interesting. In 1976, a team of scientists, or a couple of scientists from the Air Force Academy, they're riding in a car one day as a carpool of 4 different scientists, and imagine this carpool ride. They got this idea that what if what if there's an image mapping, if you will, right? What if we took this black and white negative, or what's the positive image, and put it under something called a VP8 image analyzer? Would we be able to see peaks and valleys because it's measuring the gradation in tones? Well, that's what they did, and sure enough, the Shroud produced a 3D quality that showed that the image itself kind of encodes 3D information because of the gradation from darks to lights, and so that's not something that proves it wasn't a painting as well. And so that's what started the START project going, okay, if there's 3D encoded information, something is different about this particular artifact. Let's go find out. What is this? No other picture in the world gives off that kind of rendering in the VP8 image analyzer. So it bolstered the authenticity argument, before START even got started. And of course, by 1988, it was on headlines all the time. And then the carbon dating came out, and it's like, well, see, it's fake because we carbon dated this thing to 1988. And you're just like, okay, well, we can get to that later if you like. But yeah, the 3D encoding is definitely it's one of those characteristics that has not really been duplicated with the other image characteristics. So we didn't talk about the superficiality of the image, but that's the number one characteristic.
What does that mean? Superficiality of the image.
So how to describe this? The best way I can talk about it is let's zoom in with a microscope to a single thread of an image area. All right. And so an image area would be like the tip of the nose or something like that. It's not blood. It's just the discolored fibers we talked about. We look in on that thread and we zoom in and we look at it and say, okay, let's say the thread is made up of 100 to 200 microfibers. All right. So one thread, when we're looking at this zoomed in and we see all these little microfibers. Okay. Well, the image areas or the image itself only penetrates about the top 1 to 3 microfibers of that thread. It doesn't go through to the surface. And so that's what we refer to as the superficiality. The only the top 1 to 2 or 3 microfibers, and that equates to a depth of about 200 to 500 nanometers, less than the width of a human hair. In fact, I think you'd have to split a human hair about 140 times to get the thickness or thinness of the image. And so that superficiality is hard to recreate. There's people who have tried to recreate the image of the shroud and say, here's how it was done. Well, their image fibers are not superficial enough. And then you have to say, okay, well, you've got to make it a negative, and you also have to make it three-dimensional. And there's about 15 or more other image properties that they have to be able to satisfy in order to recreate this. And that's why even with today's technology, we cannot get that level of superficiality on a linen thread that only goes 200 to 500 nanometers deep.
Is there any history in terms of linen being used as a shroud, burial shroud, as a preferred material?
As far as what?
As a preferred material, let's say.
Not for painting, right? If that's what you're referring to, not for making images, but as far as the
a death burial,
yes, there are plenty of reference or instances of burial shrouds that are made of linen. This one particular is a very fine linen because of how because of the weave. It's known as a 3-to-1 herringbone weave. Very, very fine linen. Not something that you would not a very coarse pattern of weave, a very tight weave, again, 3-to-1 herringbone. And so it's a very, would be, no matter when it was manufactured, if you believe it was medieval or not, would have been a very expensive sort of weave. But yes, linen, in Jewish burial customs, they would bury their dead in a linen shroud. That's according to Jewish burial customs.
Well, we're going to take a break, but we're going to come back. Blake Tolliver, not sure where you're from, Blake, but you've asked a brilliant, wonderful question. We're going to submerge that question, and after the break, we're going to come back to revisit Blake's question. And also, I have another question about the DNA of the blood, and just anything that any analysis on that.
Sure.
So, Mel, let's go to our break from our sponsor, Rosetta Universe.
I spent 23 years unlocking hieroglyphic secrets without the help of AI. Analyzing the Rosetta Stone scripts forced me to learn the value of critical thinking. Help the Rosetta Stone Traveling Exhibit Project transform an ancient artifact, the Rosetta Stone, into a modern metaphor for problem solving. Nothing can stop you.
You've heard it first from Jean Champollion, the one who cracked the code to hieroglyphics. He has spoken, and he's encouraging you. Don't take this lightly. He's encouraging you to check out the Rosetta Universe project. And what we have here, this is all about the Rosetta Universe project. And if you go to the QR code above, of course, if you're on your cell phone, that'll be nigh impossible. But if you have a laptop or a desktop, you can use your cell phone to go to the Rosetta Universe link tree. And the first point on the link tree is about the Rosetta Universe. And take a look at it. I think you'll be very fascinated. If you're fascinated with this information about the Shroud of Turin, I think you'll be fascinated by that too. And let's bring up Blake Tolliver's question, Mel, and let's discuss that. I think it had to do with what has been revealed based on new AI techniques for authenticating the shroud, and has it been done? Thank you, Blake. Great question.
What's been revealed based on new AI techniques for authenticating the shroud, and has it been done? So AI is a great tool, and of course I've used it for other research and different things, and I've asked it about the shroud. There's it can only, I would say it is the most researched artifact in the world, and by that I mean there's so many articles, books, journals, peer-reviewed sciences. I don't think it's been fed enough information to really dig into. This would be something that I would love to pursue. My background is in computer science, or to at least maybe lead an effort to create a large language model based on the research of the shroud. If you want to not do this, but if you want to see how much is out there, I would start with the website shroud.com. It has pretty much every article, journal entry, anything that's there. And I don't think that's been fed to a large language model. And I think your point is, what if we did that? I have fed it papers that I've written, papers that I've come across and said, analyze this. And I've also asked it questions about things in general about the shroud. As with any AI, if you ask it a kind of surface level question, you're going to get a surface level answer, because it's pulling its information from publicly available sources, or what may have been fed to the model at different times. So I would say it leans more towards the skeptics, because public opinion in general, who haven't done the research and the science, is going to be more skeptic about it. So I would say a surface level answer is going to be maybe the verdict is out, but it's probably medieval, because that's what the latest scientific research, the carbon-14 dating. So what I would recommend is you want to use AI as a tool. So if you come across a paper you don't fully understand, feed it to the chat and say, explain this to me like I'm 5. And that's what AI is really good for. But if we can make a large language model just for the shroud, I mean, that would be awesome, because then you could ask questions of all the research that's been done on it, including those who are skeptics. And there's plenty of papers out there from skeptics. But it's there hasn't been something like that I know of.
Thank you, Blake. Really appreciate it. And anyone else with a question, feel free to bring it to us, and we'll take a look at it.
I hope I answered the question.
Here's another one. Carol Vetter. I don't know where you're from, Carol, but thank you for this question. Have they tried to reconstruct what Jesus' face really looked like?
Oh yeah, there's been lots of attempts. In fact, from the shroud itself, yes, and I've seen some really good, even with AI, as we just talked about, attempts to say this is probably what he looked like. But the thing with the shroud, there's no directionality of the image, so it's not like, again, there's no brush strokes, but there's also no like lighting come from a certain angle or things like that. And so it's sort of like if you make a realistic version of it, it's like, okay, this is the interpretation of how it might look. But there is an exhibit. I think the last I saw was in Spain, and it contains a hyper realistic model of how a lot of the Shroudies, we call ourselves Shroudies, what we call ourselves, but a lot of Shroudies, they refer to him as the man in the shroud, because we don't know if it's Jesus. When you can say it's Jesus to most people understand what you're talking about, but the exhibit refers to him as the man of the shroud. And this hyper realistic, you can do a Google search for it, and it'll show you how amazing this sculpture looks. And it's the It's a man in a burial pose. He's naked. Everything about this is hyper realistic. Again, the man in the shroud is covering his pelvic region, and so is the sculpture. But I mean, even I think underneath those hands is hyper realistic as well. So I haven't been to the exhibit myself, but he's covered in wound marks all over his body, blood in the scalp and the hair, the wound in the side. Yeah, so that's probably the most amazing attempt to reconstruct the face of Jesus. And early artwork, when we talked about like what about the historical record, not only is the image of Edessa one of the key links to its past, but also art history. This is where art history, if you love art, go study art and the icons of Jesus. They started to change. The face of Jesus started to change around the 6th century. They believe when the image of Edessa was found, it was hidden in a wall in Edessa, and after the city flooded, they somehow, I guess, they went through and they found this artifact, the image of Edessa, hidden in the wall in Edessa around 544 AD, and or 526, I think. By 544, we get this image, the first, it's called the Christ Pantocrator. Look that one up in Syria. And the points of congruence on that face of the Christ Pantocrator compared to the shroud, it's almost like the artist who made this Christ Pantocrator, can't say it, was looking at the shroud when he made it. He's got the face has a long nose, a beard, large eyes, hair parted in the middle, all these different things that's like, it really matches up. And then from that point forward, the images of Jesus became what we know them today. Before that, it was Jesus was portrayed very Roman-like, short hair, no beard, very youthful looking. And now you see these images starting after the image of Edessa was discovered again in the wall after the city flooded. The icons and the artwork starts changing.
Thank you. Dennis Jones, he says, maybe I missed it, but have they carbon dated the shroud?
Had they carbon dated the shroud? We have not talked about that. Do you want to get into that now, Joel?
Sure. Let's jump right in. Dennis wants us to, and I want us to too.
Yeah, it's a big topic, and this is the one. This is the thing that really a lot of people got hung up on after 1988. So the STURT team that went there in 1978, carbon dating was known, but at the time that the kind of carbon dating would require a very large sample to do carbon dating, and they decided not to do it. They said, let's wait to see if this process, this methodology matures. And sure enough, by 1988, the process had matured to the point where they only needed a very small sample in order to do carbon dating. So it's finally, I guess, approved. A whole list of things that originally was agreed on, but when all was said and done, a lot of that, what they call protocol, was changed. They originally were going to have 7 labs test it. They narrowed it down to just 3. That's kind of strange. The sample that was taken was from a very known contaminated corner, because artwork of the shroud from its known history shows priests and whatnot holding the shroud up by its corners. And so that's just pure contamination there by being held by human hands. And then, of course, it was in a fire in 1532 that could add carbon to it. So, but they took the sample from this corner, a well-known contaminated corner, and instead of going with the protocol where they were going to take samples across throughout the shroud, they cut one sample, they split it into 3 pieces, and sent it off to 3 labs. So essentially, it was just one sample, just separated 3 times. And I guess the idea was like, maybe if these labs, if they agree, we should get a similar date. And so that's how we can, verify, or we can say that this is a valid test, which I don't know why they split one sample 3 ways, but that's what they did. But this is definitely the most debated objection. The results of the carbon dating were released on October 13th, 1988. And again, the short story is that they selected a sample not representative of the whole cloth. And I'll fast forward. This was
what were the results? What would they date it to?
They dated to the years 1260 to 1390.
Mm-hmm.
And my idea of the sample being not representative of the whole cloth, this is actually proven true using statistical analysis of the raw data in 2018. 30 years went by before they could analyze the raw data that was done from the carbon-14 data, or carbon-14 dating. And up until that time, scientists and skeptics, they would argue over, the Shroud sample is not, a good place. Of course, we knew that, but how do you prove that? Okay. And they would say, okay, let's look at it under the microscope. Oh, look, there's cotton in the sample, and the shroud is made of linen. So therefore, it's not, chemically speaking, it's not the same material. So we can tell that there's a lot of truth to this, but that's really all they could argue. Up until 2018, that's what they would do. Now we have statistical analysis. And I want to talk about that because there's not enough discussion about the statistical analysis and the results of that to prove that the sample wasn't a good sample. And so the analysis shows that the samples were not homogeneous. And that means that homogeneous variances, if they're the same, meaning homogeneous, that means that the labs worked properly. And they all worked at the equal levels of precision. It's like three marksmen who can shoot with the same level of accuracy. All the labs were the same. So if it was homogeneous, we would see the labs working properly. Again, the samples were not homogeneous. That was the bottom line. If they're heterogeneous, which that's what they found, that means that the sample has internal inconsistency. So if it's homogeneous, as three marksmen who have the same level of accuracy, heterogeneous means that their shots all landed in different places. Okay? And so the problem isn't how precisely they shot, it's where their bullets landed. And it raises the red flag. If the labs were equally precise, which let's assume all three labs were equally precise, they should have gotten the same average data, but they didn't. And that's the heterogeneity. I can't say heterogeneity. That's what makes it heterogeneous, because they got different results. And that suggests that something's wrong with the sample or its consistency, what it's composed of. So the carbon dating is not reliable because they don't agree. Even though the labs did their job properly, they don't agree. And there's other statistical things we can get into. There's other things I like to talk about. It undermines the original conclusion that that the shroud is 1260 to 1390. They averaged 12 data measurements. They averaged the dates of 12 measurements. Okay, and you can't just average things like that. It's like trying to average the temperatures of different cities across the continent, and saying that's the average temperature for that one town. It's just misleading. You just don't average things like that when you're looking at dates. And that's what they did. And they came up with 1260 to 1390. They also weren't supposed to collaborate. They did collaborate. They didn't spend as much time as doing the research as what you probably should have done. It took 10 months to do the statistical analysis in 2018. I think it was something like 5 weeks before they came back with their average in 1988. So very rushed. You got to wonder about the actual thing. But again, statistically speaking, because of the results that they got, and because it's a heterogeneous sample or heterogeneous results, that proves that the sample wasn't a good sample. And it's funny because now skeptics who used to rely on carbon dating, they hear this statistical analysis and they go, okay, so I guess we don't have carbon dating to go on anymore. That kind of undermines our belief that it's not real. The sample is wrong. So either test it again or find other ways. There are other ways to do testing, but the church, the Catholic Church, the Pope actually owns, quote unquote, owns the shroud, and he has to be the one to sanction any additional tests. There's been tests done privately. The latest one that's brought the shroud into the news lately is known as the wide-angle X-ray scattering, and this dated the shroud to the 1st century. So that's the latest one. I think in 2022, they had some thread samples, and it didn't destroy the threads. It's a kind of test that doesn't destroy it. So that would be great to be able to do that across the entire shroud, to do non-destructive tests. that you can do. So that's the long and the short of carbon dating.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis, for bringing that to the show. What about the DNA, the blood? Is there O positive, O negative, AB, B?
Yeah, the blood. That's a fun topic too. How much time you got? No, I'll try to.
We've got about 13 minutes. Let's give us as
I'll give you a 5-minute.
Okay.
If I can, 5-minute thing. So they've done tests on it. So you can't reconstruct, or you can't the DNA, I should say, the DNA on the shroud is non-existent. It's degraded so bad you can't actually do DNA types of tests, but you can do blood tests, and they have done blood tests for in 1978. Part of their conclusion was that the shroud tests positive for blood, serum, other components of blood, hemoglobin. Or no, maybe it wasn't hemoglobin. It was the parts of blood. Anyways, it was real human blood is what they concluded when they tested it. And what they found in the blood areas indicate the presence of hemoglobin and elevated levels of bilirubin. And that's important because an elevated level of bilirubin means that if you have that in a blood stain on something like a shroud, where we can see clear trauma happening to this person, the high levels or the elevated levels of bilirubin means that it's consistent with someone who suffered severe trauma. And so that's your red blood cells. The bilirubin is a yellow pigment that's produced during the breakdown of the heme, HEME, of the hemoglobin in the red blood cells. And so severe physical trauma, like scourging, like whipping the body or nailing the hands, beating in the face, all these things we can see on the shroud. But the severe physical trauma can lead to an increased breakdown of red blood cells. That's called hemolysis. And that results in the elevated bilirubin levels in the blood. So it's because the trauma is increasing the breakdown of the red blood cells, and because they're breaking down, bilirubin is going up. But a lot of people say, why is the blood still red? Well, a researcher, I think it was in 2014. I don't know what year it was. It was within this decade. Researcher Paulo De Lazzaro and his colleagues suggested that blood mixed with high levels of bilirubin, when they're exposed to UV light source, could generate a shift towards the yellow-red colors that are seen on the shroud. So the blood remains red and bright red because of possibly being exposed to a burst of UV light. Again, if this image was created as a result of the resurrection, then you would have, that'd be maybe a kind of UV light. Well, that's what they proved, that UV light exposing these spots of red blood cell, the blood on the shroud, would cause it to stay red.
There's no blood type then.
Oh yeah, it was typed to blood type AB. Sorry,
AB. Okay.
Yeah, blood type AB, which is the rarest blood type, but it's most commonly found in Jewish males.
Is that the universal donor?
I believe so. I think the AB is the one or universal receiver. I think you can receive all blood types. Yeah. And
then talk a little bit about the spike marks in the disto space of the wrist as opposed to the traditional, and just talk a little bit about that. What does that mean?
As far as like how he was nailed to the wrists?
Yes.
Okay. So I like starting off with this. Have you heard, Joel, and maybe your viewers, that we know that Jesus most likely was not crucified through the palms, because why? Can you answer that question? Why was Jesus not crucified through the palms?
Well, I think the body weight would be ripped off, right?
How do you know that?
Because of the fragile nature.
Right, but
and the bones aren't structured.
Right. How do you know that that's the answer? Have you studied it somewhere? You heard about it somewhere?
Well, I know that they put some cadavers up on the wall, and they actually experimented with cadavers, and this would not hold the body weight, the dead weight.
Very good. And that's exactly right. So you've done the research, you've done that. So did you know that the reason we know that, I hear a lot of Christians will say, Jesus was not crucified through the palms because it wouldn't hold the body weight. He was crucified through the wrists. All right, we see that on the shroud.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know the reason we know about the crucified through the wrists is because of the shroud? In the early 30s, a doctor named Pierre Barbet studied the photographs that Secondo Pia and Giuseppe Henri had taken, and he saw that the nail went through the wrist, and so he is the one who did the experiments on the cadavers. So this whole concept of the nails through the wrists is because of the shroud. The book is called A Doctor at Calvary. It's maybe reversed in the thing, but this is a great book by Pierre Barbet from the 1950s, I think is when he published it. But he talks about how his experiments on the cadavers and how it wouldn't support the weight. That's why we know what we know. Why is that significant? Well, the nail wounds going through the wrist, all artwork of Jesus, even today, it shows the nails going through the palms, and also shows the entry wound. The shroud shows the exit wound. If an artist is going to create this image, why would he go from deviate from the norm and show the nail through the wrist, right? Why would he show the exit wound? Why are there no thumbs on the shroud, right? If you look close if you go back and do your research and pull up an image, you see that his wrists are crossed. You see one nail wound, but you see two blood trails down the arm. So that implies that there's another wound in the wrist that's being covered. But his hands are crossed, and so you can't see thumbs. Well, when Pierre Barbet did his studies on the cadavers and would pierce the wrist, well, he found that when you pierce the wrist to destot space, it severs the median nerve. And when you sever the median nerve, it causes the wrist to fold in. Okay.
The thumb to fold in.
Sorry. Yeah, when you pierce the wrist, it causes the thumb to fold in. And there's been other research done on this. People who have experienced a piercing through the wrist through whatever accident or crime or something like that, like with stabbing or something like that. You pierce the median nerve, your thumb will fold in and pretty much stay in like that. And so there's no thumbs on the man on the shroud. That's a very interesting detail, and that's important to another art history. There's an image known as from a book called the Prayer Codex, Hungarian Prayer Codex, and in it is an image of what we believe is Jesus. It's a scene of Jesus being buried, and then the scene right beneath it of the resurrection where Jesus is gone. Well, on that Prayer Codex, dated to 1192, 1195, the man on the shroud, before you see this resurrection, has no thumbs, right? So whoever drew this image was copying from the shroud, not just because of the thumbs, but the most important piece is in the resurrection scene just beneath. You see 4 holes in the shape of an L drawn into this, what looks to be the shroud, and those 4 L-shaped holes, or that L-shaped holes, whatever, they appear on the shroud in that same pattern. Why would an artist draw 4 holes in that pattern on the image in his Prayer Codex? So, but the 4 fingers, the long fingers, the fingers are long because what we're looking at here is not just the length of the fingers, but the fingers going all the way down into the hand. The fingers, the bones of the fingers extend all the way down. So the fingers appear abnormally long. Well, the shroud is acting also in those areas like a negative. You also see his teeth if you look closely on the shroud. So these are all scientific things you can get into, and these get debated. But yeah, it is really cool. Hope that answers.
When someone looks at the back, the trajectory seems to show that one of the guards or whoever it was that was beating this person was shorter than the other and meaner and more passionate.
Yeah.
The Jewish tradition is the 40 lashes, according to the Jewish law, and they would generally stop at 39 just in case in the heat of passion they miscounted, right? But when Romans had no such rule. And can you talk a little bit about that aspect?
Yeah.
In terms of relevant to the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. And you've done some research. I can tell that's a little known fact about the whip markings on the back. as Joel said, they can tell forensically that there's two soldiers or whoever, two individuals whipping this person. One was about 2 inches shorter than the other, and one was more aggressive because of the amount of marks on the one side. And it's not just on his back; it's also on his front. His groin area is not affected. His arms are not affected, so he most likely had his hands up here, but he does have marks on his bottom. Not on the bottom of his feet, but all the way down his calves, all the way up and down his thighs, everywhere on his chest. So he was definitely beaten and whipped in the way that the Gospels describe Jesus. Well, they don't describe it; they just say Jesus was scourged. So what do we know about scourging? Was from the shroud, and so there's also what's interesting about the scourge marks. So we can see that. Well, we can kind of see a procession of events here, right? The scourging happened first because after the scourging, or on top of the scourging, I should say, on the back, on the shoulder blades of the man of the shroud, the shoulder blades look to have abrasions, right? And by that, we know there are abrasions because where there would have been the whip marks, they're all smeared, and they're smeared in a way that something was across his shoulder blades on either side. He could have been carrying what we know as the patibulum, even like this, or on one side like that. But there's a smearing, and so that scourging happened first, and so you see the sequence of events, and something heavy was placed on top of that. So I don't know if that answers your question, since you did a good job of explaining how the scourging happened. But the scourging is most likely what in Jesus' death, because of how much blood was lost and the shock that happened to his body.
And the asphyxiation of pushing one.
That's how he ultimately that's how people died on the cross, was from asphyxiation. And the way I like to describe that, it's asphyxiation is not being able to breathe. Well, it feels like drowning, because in order to breathe, you have to push up on the cross to exhale, and then you'd inhale when you come down. If you want to let your breath out, imagine holding your breath. So it's like drowning, holding your breath until you die, because he can't exhale. And so because he can't exhale, then he's just holding all that air in. And so that's, again, how you die. And that's why they break the legs, because if you can't push up, then you're essentially just, holding your breath until you die, because you can't push up.
Yeah. And the legs were not broken on the shroud, right?
Right. There's no broken bones anywhere. His nose is a little bit, looks like it might be a break in the nose or some kind of fracture there, but the nose is made of cartilage. So no broken bones.
Well, folks, the reason I brought Stephen on is I wanted us to just take a look at the Shroud of Turin. And also, I wanted to encourage you to take a look at Isaiah chapter 57. Just take this evening, or whenever you're watching this, just read Isaiah 53, and Psalm 18. So it's Isaiah 53, the Old Testament seer, Isaiah.
Psalm 22, I think.
What's that?
Psalm 22.
Psalm 22, yes. And yeah, that's right. Psalm 22, Isaiah 53. And then maybe read some of the New Testament accounts and just see how it all comes together in your mind. Personally, whether or not this is truly the Shroud of Turin is not of great consequence to me personally, but it is something that helps to, I think, reveal the passion of the Christ. When you look at the story, you look at the narrative. Maybe many of you've seen the movie Mel Gibson made and some other movies on this topic. And I think it's just an important thing to take a look at. Stephen, I thank you so much for taking time. Can
I give a conclusion real quick too?
Yes. Yes, 30 seconds.
Sure. The authenticity of the shroud does not affect the message of the gospel. And studying it doesn't replace faith. If the shroud was fake, it would not shake my faith in the least. So studying it doesn't replace your faith. It actually deepens the wonder. And in the end, faith isn't in a cloth. It's in the one the cloth might have wrapped.
Stephen, I really appreciate you taking time out of your crazy, busy schedule and joining us here on the Mischief Maker Show.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, thanks for joining us. And ebity, that's all, folks.
You have just experienced another episode of the Mischief Maker broadcast. Hit the subscribe button. Connect at chiefmischiefmaker.com. Thanks for coming along for the ride. And hopefully, you are now a bit closer to becoming a mischief maker in your part of the world.